I was standing in the hallway with my suitcase zipped, boarding pass printed, passport tucked neatly in the front pocket of my carry-on. The taxi would arrive in 30 minutes. I'd already fed the cat, turned down the thermostat, and double-checked the locks. Everything was ready for the trip I had spent 6 months planning. Europe. A dream I'd shelved for nearly 20 years. But this time it wasn't for me alone. It was supposed to be a family vacation. My daughter Erica, her husband Brandon, and me. We had talked about it over coffee, booked tickets together, even split the itinerary between Paris, Rome, and Amsterdam. I'd handled the flights and hotel reservations. They were responsible for planning a few walking tours and museum stops. At least, that's what I thought. As I reached for the navy blue shirt I wanted to wear on the flight, something light but polished, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I expected a text from Erica, maybe something like, "We'll meet you at the terminal," or "Don't forget your charger." Instead, what I read felt like a slap across the face. "Hey Dad, you're not coming with us to Europe. Brandon thinks it should be a family vacation. Sorry." I stared at the words, unmoving. I didn't even sit down. I just stood there, the shirt still dangling from my hand. I blinked once, twice. The message didn't change. My heart was doing that strange thing it did when I'd accidentally cut myself with a knife in the kitchen last year. Not pain, but shock. A cold buzz under the skin, a pulling in the gut. I swallowed hard and read the message again. The same words stared back at me. Brandon thinks it should be a family vacation. As if I wasn't family. A second message followed. "We'll talk when we're back. Please don't make a big deal." No explanation, no warning, not even a phone call. Just that, a digital disowning, like I was an employee being let go through an automated system. I slowly set the phone down, the screen glowing with that little blue bubble. Erica's name sat at the top, and under it, silence. No apology, no gratitude, no trace of the girl who used to run to me when she scraped her knee or needed help with her math homework. I lowered myself onto the edge of the bed. My suitcase sat there open, clothes folded with care, passport ready, my reading glasses in the side pocket. I'd printed out restaurant recommendations for Rome and color-coded our itinerary by city. Paris was first. We were supposed to have dinner near the Seine the night we landed. I had even booked us a table with a view of the water. I remembered Brandon said he wanted to try escargot. I had smiled when he said that, tried to be supportive, tried to belong. Now, I felt like a fool. I opened the suitcase slowly and removed the shirt from the top. The soft cotton slid between my fingers as I placed it back in the closet, its smell still fresh from the dryer. One by one, I began unpacking. Not frantically, not with anger. Just slowly, deliberately. As if I needed each movement to help me understand what had just happened. I canceled my flight. The woman on the other end of the call sounded sorrier than my own daughter had. "I'm sorry to hear that, Mr. Hartman," she said. "Would you like a credit or a refund to your card?" I didn't even care. "Credit's fine," I replied, even though I had no future trips in mind. At that moment, I wasn't thinking of Paris or Venice or any ancient cathedral we were meant to visit. I was thinking about how fast people forget what you've done for them the moment you're no longer convenient. The kitchen was too quiet. Even the tick of the wall clock felt loud. I stared at the chair where I usually sat on Sunday afternoons, where Erica once curled up to show me photos of wedding dresses. I remembered how nervous she had been about introducing Brandon, how she leaned on me when things were tough. I had listened, helped, paid, and supported. And now I was being left behind. Not even with resentment, but with polite dismissal. Brandon thinks it should be a family vacation. That sentence rang like a church bell in my head, loud, wrong, echoing. I walked outside and sat on the porch, the summer sun warm against my arms. Kids rode bikes in the cul-de-sac, my neighbor trimmed his hedges. It was just another normal day. But something had cracked in my life, in a way I couldn't quite name yet. Not rage, not grief, just the quiet sound of something shifting, breaking. The sound of a man realizing he's not wanted by the people he once thought he belonged to. That night, I left the suitcase half-zipped by the closet door and laid down in bed without brushing my teeth. I stared at the ceiling, the room painted in pale moonlight. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I didn't even answer Erica's last text. "We'll talk when we're back." because in that moment, I knew there was nothing left to talk about. The next morning, the suitcase still sat untouched by the door. I hadn't had the heart to move it, and now it just stood there like a monument to everything I didn't see coming. A zipped-up reminder of how naive I'd been. I moved past it like you would walk around a gravestone, quietly, avoiding eye contact, knowing exactly what it meant. The kitchen smelled like yesterday's coffee and unopened mail. My cat, Millie, brushed against my leg, probably wondering why I hadn't left like I said I would. I poured her food, watched her eat in silence, then sat at the kitchen table and stared at nothing. The dining chairs were still pulled back from where I'd been double-checking my packing list the night before. I'd even practiced folding my blazer so it wouldn't wrinkle in my carry-on. It was all so ridiculous now. There was no flight to catch, no cobblestone streets to stroll, no midnight gelato in Rome. Just me, the suitcase, and the echo of that text. "You're not coming." Brandon thinks it should be a family vacation. My daughter had sent that without hesitation. No conflict in her tone, just a decision made, carried out like a business transaction. Like canceling a lunch meeting. I opened the fridge and closed it again. Nothing looked good. I wasn't hungry, not really. I walked back to the bedroom and sat at the foot of the bed, staring at the suitcase. It had been a gift from Erica, 2 years ago. Christmas. She had given it to me with a card that said, "For future adventures." Now it was just a cruel irony. I unzipped it again, not because I was going anywhere, but because I couldn't stand seeing it packed like that. One by one, I removed my things. The guidebooks I'd bookmarked, the navy shirt I'd wanted to wear on the flight, the dress shoes I'd polished just 2 nights earlier. Everything had been selected carefully, folded with care, handled with hope. The guidebooks still had yellow sticky notes where I'd marked restaurants I thought Erica and Brandon would enjoy. I'd even highlighted a few kid-friendly spots, just in case they wanted to talk about starting a family while we were there. It was foolish of me. I see that now. But at the time, it made me feel included, like I was helping them build memories. I placed the books on the shelf, back where they had sat untouched for years, long before I thought this trip might actually happen. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that sinks into your bones. I turned on the radio, hoping for some background noise, but even the soft hum of classical music felt out of place. It was like the walls had absorbed my humiliation and were echoing it back at me. I walked to the living room and sat on the couch. Millie jumped up beside me and curled against my thigh, purring gently. She was the only living creature who seemed to notice I was still here. I picked up my phone, not to text Erica, but to scroll. Anything to pull my mind away. But everything I saw brought it all back. A sponsored ad for travel insurance. A Facebook memory of Erica and me at her college graduation. A post from one of her friends commenting on how brave she was for taking time away to focus on family. I clicked through the comments like someone prodding a wound. One photo in particular caught my attention. Brandon and Erica sitting at an outdoor cafe in Paris. Brandon had his arm around her. She was smiling, wineglass in hand. In the background, I recognized the stone facade of the hotel I had booked for all 3 of us. It wasn't a coincidence. It was the same room, the same window. They hadn't changed anything. I put the phone down and leaned back against the couch, letting my head rest on the cushion behind me. I stared at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above me, each rotation a loop of disbelief. They had gone on the vacation I planned, stayed in the room I booked, and posed in front of the landmarks I had dreamed of visiting. Without me. Worse, by excluding me. Not by accident, not by unfortunate circumstance, by choice. I looked back toward the hallway, where the suitcase now lay open, but still full of the silence they left behind. I couldn't bring myself to finish unpacking it. Not yet. It felt like erasing evidence, and some part of me needed to sit with it a little longer, to really feel what had happened, to let it burn. I spent the rest of the day moving through the house like a ghost, touching doorknobs I didn't need to turn, folding blankets that didn't need folding, checking the locks on doors no one was going to walk through. Every action was mechanical. A performance of normalcy in a life that had suddenly become unrecognizable. I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about a trip, that this wasn't just about one text. This was about something bigger, deeper, older. The quiet realization that somewhere along the way I had stopped being seen as a father and started being seen as a burden. And that realization, more than the text, more than the trip, was what hollowed me out. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed with the lights off, the room filled with the low hum of the ceiling fan and the occasional tick of the old clock in the hallway. I kept waiting for something, an apology text, a call from Erica, even a sign that this was all some kind of misunderstanding. But nothing came. Just silence. I must have checked my phone at least 20 times before the sun came up, each time hoping to find something that would explain the betrayal. But the only thing I found was confirmation that I'd been cut out. At 7:12 a.m., I saw it, a new Facebook post. Erica had uploaded a photo with Brandon and his parents standing in front of the Eiffel Tower. Her caption read, "Grateful for family time in the most beautiful city on earth." My breath caught in my throat. I stared at the screen, eyes locked on that one word. Family. That's what she wrote. That's who she chose. Brandon's parents were smiling like they belonged there, like they were the ones who had sacrificed, saved, and supported, like I didn't exist. I clicked through the album. More pictures, more smiles. Brandon's parents at the cafe I'd picked out for our first breakfast. Erica wearing the scarf I gave her last Christmas, standing on the bridge I had researched because she once mentioned loving river views. They had followed my itinerary down to the hour, every dinner, every photo spot, every hotel. All of it. My planning, my money, my dream. And I wasn't in a single frame. I wasn't even a memory. I set the phone down and sat on the edge of my bed, hands folded like I was in church, trying to pray the ache away. My house felt smaller. Not physically, but emotionally. Like the walls were pressing in, full of memories that no longer made sense. I walked to the hallway and looked at the gallery of family photos I'd spent years curating. Erica's wedding, her graduation, childhood birthday parties, all smiling faces, all moments where I thought I was doing something right. But now those pictures looked different. They looked staged. A performance of love that, in hindsight, felt conditional. I had been included because I was useful, because I could pay for the cake, rent the tux, cover the tuition, but love, respect, that was never guaranteed. Not once she had Brandon, not once she had someone new to orbit around. I found myself standing in front of one photo in particular. Erica sitting on my shoulders at a county fair, both of us beaming, her hands in the air like she was flying. It was the kind of photo you keep forever, the kind you show to strangers when they ask if you have kids. I used to love that photo. But now, I just stared at it and wondered when exactly things had shifted. When did I stop being a father and start being an obstacle? When did the word dad stop meaning something sacred? Later that day, I went out for a walk, just to clear my head. The neighborhood was quiet, but not silent. A lawnmower buzzed in the distance. A few kids rode scooters down the sidewalk. Life was happening. People were moving forward. And I was stuck in a loop, trying to figure out what I'd done wrong. I passed a house with a "Welcome Home Grandpa" banner stretched across the garage. Balloons fluttered gently in the breeze. I smiled at it before the pain crept in. That was supposed to be me someday. I had imagined it. Erica handing me my first grandchild, calling me on Sunday mornings just to talk, dropping by for dinner and bringing stories from her life. I wanted that future. I built my life around that future. But I realized somewhere deep in my chest that it wasn't going to happen. That future had been quietly erased, rewritten without me. I came home and walked straight to the mirror in my office. I looked at myself. Really looked. My hair had grayed faster than I remembered. There were lines around my eyes I didn't recognize. But it wasn't the aging that struck me. It was the sadness. A quiet, long-term sadness that had settled into my expression like an unwanted tenant. I looked like someone who had given everything and didn't understand where it had all gone. I sat at my desk and opened the bottom drawer where I kept old letters and keepsakes. In a faded envelope, I found the Father's Day card Erica had made when she was 10. "You're the best dad in the world," it said in purple marker, surrounded by little stick figure hearts. I held it in my hands for a long time, trying to decide if it meant anything anymore. Family means something different now. That's what I kept thinking. It's not who's related to you. It's not who shares your blood or your last name. It's who chooses you, who shows up when it matters, Who makes room for you at the table? And in that sense, Erica and Brandon had made their choice, and now so would I. The following afternoon, I sat at the kitchen table with a mug of coffee I'd reheated twice but still hadn't touched. The sky outside was overcast, the kind of dull gray that made everything feel a little heavier. I stared at my phone, debating whether to call her. Erica hadn't reached out again. No text, no explanation, just silence. But I needed to hear her voice. I needed to know if this was really as cold as it seemed, or if there was something left beneath the surface, some shred of the daughter I once knew. I tapped her name on the screen and held the phone to my ear. It rang twice before I heard her voice, bright, cheerful. "Hi, Dad." She sounded like she was walking somewhere. I could hear footsteps, the distant hum of traffic, a car horn. It was mid-afternoon in Paris. "I need to ask you something," I said, skipping the pleasantries. "Okay." "What's up?" she answered. "I saw the photos," I said. "You, Brandon, his parents, in Paris." There was a pause, longer this time, then her tone changed. "Dad, we were going to tell you." I cut her off. "You said it was a family vacation. You made that very clear. What am I then?" Her voice shifted, sharper now. "Brandon thinks you can be a bit overwhelming. He wanted this trip to be relaxing." The word hit me hard. Overwhelming. "I planned this trip," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "I paid for the flights, the hotels, the dinners. I spent months putting it together." "Well, Brandon's parents paid their own way," she replied quickly, defensive. "They don't expect us to take care of them constantly." There it was again. Constantly. Like I was some financial leash they were desperate to unclip. "I supported you through school," I said. "Helped with your wedding, co-signed for your house. When did I become too much?" "We never asked for guilt, Dad," she snapped. "You act like you're doing us favors, but then you hold it over our heads. Maybe you just don't know how to let go." I heard Brandon's voice in the background, laughing, carefree, not even aware of the conversation unraveling in her hand. She wasn't finished. "Brandon says you're needy, that you use money to stay involved." That word, needy. It didn't come with fire. It came with finality, like a closing door. I didn't respond right away. I couldn't. "Are you done?" I asked. "I think it's best if we talk when we get back," she said. "I don't think there'll be anything left to talk about," I replied. And I ended the call. I set the phone down gently on the table, my hand resting there longer than it needed to. The screen went dark, leaving behind only my reflection. Tired, smaller somehow. Everything around me looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. The refrigerator still hummed, the clock still ticked. Millie still slept on the windowsill. But inside me, something had shifted permanently. I stood and walked slowly to my office. The hallway was lined with framed photos, Erica's milestones, our memories, frozen smiles that no longer felt real. I looked at the one from her college graduation, where I stood behind her, pride in my eyes. At her wedding, where I held her hand before she walked down the aisle. At her 6th birthday, when she hugged me tighter than the world. I used to think these were tokens of love. Now, they looked like receipts. I sat at my desk and opened the bottom drawer. Inside were envelopes, bank records, tuition receipts, credit card payments, wire transfers. I started pulling them out, not with rage, but with a strange clarity. The student loan checks, the venue deposit, the emergency car repairs, the down payment for their first home. Every document had a number. Every number had a moment. Every moment had a motive. And yet here I was, accused of clinging, of being too involved, too emotional, too available. I had given freely, without conditions. Because I believed that's what fathers did. But I finally understood something I should have seen years ago. I wasn't being included out of love, I was being tolerated out of utility. And now that I'd served my purpose, they wanted space, distance, silence. The call didn't just break my heart, it broke the illusion. And sometimes that hurts more than the betrayal itself, because now I couldn't pretend. I couldn't excuse it. I couldn't minimize it. I knew exactly where I stood, and knowing that changed everything. After the call ended, I didn't leave my office for hours. I sat there, not moving, not speaking, just staring at the walls, at the evidence of a life I thought had meaning. I had always taken pride in how I kept everything organized. Folders labeled, files alphabetized, receipts saved. But now, looking at them scattered across my desk like debris after a storm, they felt less like documents and more like confessions. each one telling the story of a man who confused being needed with being loved. I opened the drawer on the left side of my desk and pulled out the manila envelope labeled Mortgage, Maple Street. I remembered when Erica and Brandon came to me, eyes hopeful, smiles wide, asking if I'd help them buy their first home. Just for the approval, Erica had said. We'll refinance later. They never did. My name stayed on the deed, not because they forgot, but because they didn't want the responsibility. And I let them. I told myself it was what any father would do. Now I knew better. Next came the receipts from the wedding. $30,000. Venue, catering, dress fittings, floral arrangements. I had paid for it all. Not once did I complain. Not once did I ask for anything in return. I wanted it to be perfect for her because she deserved that. Or at least, I believed she did then. The irony was that Brandon's parents, the ones smiling in her Paris vacation photos, hadn't paid a dime. But they were the ones she considered family. I kept digging. Tuition payments from her college years. 4 semesters I covered when her financial aid fell short. The spring break trip I funded when she said she needed a break to clear her head. The first car I co-signed for when she got her internship. Even the moving truck she used to leave my house when she got married, I paid for that too. And now I was needy. The files blurred before my eyes. I wasn't angry, not in the way most people think of anger. I wasn't screaming or punching walls. No, this was something colder. A kind of grief that calcifies into quiet resolve. I was looking at a lifetime of transactions disguised as affection. A fatherhood managed through invoices and wire transfers. I stood up and walked to the shelf where I kept the photo albums. Not the framed kind you show guests, but the thick leather-bound ones filled with years of real memories. I flipped through them slowly, page by page. Erica's childhood birthday parties, vacations, school plays, me in the front row with the camcorder, me holding her hand in front of Cinderella's castle, me clapping at her piano recital. In every photo, I was present. In every memory, I had shown up. And still, none of that was enough to earn me a place on that plane. One photo slipped out of the album and landed face down on the carpet. I picked it up. It was from her graduation. She was wearing her cap and gown, grinning ear to ear. Brandon stood beside her. And there I was, just behind them, smiling but off-center. A step behind, out of focus. Somehow that framing said everything. I had always been behind them. Never quite part of the picture. I put the albums away, one by one, then returned to the desk. The last file I opened was labeled Travel Europe. Inside was every confirmation email, every booking, every ticket I'd printed for the trip that never happened. My itinerary, neatly organized by day, the hotel confirmation, the reservation for the dinner cruise on the Seine, the museum passes. My visa statement showed the charges in full. No contributions from Erica, nothing from Brandon. Just me. But they took the trip anyway. They used the plans I built, they followed my roadmap. They just deleted me from it. I looked around my office at the walls that once made me feel accomplished. They now felt like a museum of misplaced loyalty. I wasn't a father in their lives. I was a service provider, a credit line with a last name. A man who had been generous, not because he had to be, but because he believed that love was something you proved through action. And now, those actions were being used as evidence against me. Twisted into neediness, spun into guilt trips, reduced to a liability. I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking beneath me, and let the silence wrap around my shoulders. The truth had been hiding in plain sight. I wasn't included because I mattered. I was included because I paid. And now that I'd begun to ask questions, now that I expected even a sliver of respect in return, I was too much. Too involved. Too inconvenient. So be it. If all I ever was to them was useful, then it was time to stop being useful. Because usefulness without love is just exploitation dressed up as gratitude. And I had finally learned how to tell the difference. The next morning, I was still in my robe, holding a lukewarm mug of coffee, when my phone pinged with a banking notification. I almost ignored it. Thought it might be a spam alert or some routine balance update I'd seen 100 times. But the subject line caught my eye. Transaction processed, card ending in 2184. That was the authorized card. The one I had added Erica to years ago, back when she was just starting out, trying to build credit, trying to find her footing, a safety net, a gesture of trust. I opened the app, scanning the details with a numb kind of curiosity. Liberard Restaurant, Paris, France, $143.68. The timestamp showed it was just a few hours ago, that right around lunchtime in Paris. I stared at the screen for a full minute. My thumb hovered over the transaction, as if clicking on it might somehow change the outcome. But there it was, clear as daylight. They weren't just enjoying the trip without me, they were enjoying it on me. I scrolled back through the charges. Boutique chic, $385. Luxury shopping. Musée d'Orsay tickets. A river cruise. A guided walking tour I never authorized but remembered bookmarking during my planning phase. Everything I had built, down to the last reservation, was now being lived without me. And worse, I was footing the bill. A dull ringing filled my ears as I paced the room, holding my phone like it might shatter from the weight of betrayal. I pulled up the authorized user list. Erica's name sat there, perfectly innocent in digital typeface. Years of access. Years of trust. Years of assuming that when I gave, it was received with gratitude. But now, every swipe of that card felt like a slap in the face, a silent confirmation that I was good enough to pay, but not good enough to be present. I sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd once helped her fill out college applications, the same table where she'd cried after breaking up with her first boyfriend, the same place we'd toasted to her engagement. And now, the same place where I watched her drain my account from across the ocean. Another ping. $85, Paris boutique. No message, no explanation, no acknowledgement, just another dent in my balance and a bruise to my pride. I stood, walked back to my office, and stared again at the framed photo of us on her wedding day. I had paid for everything: the dress, the venue, the open bar, the photographer. That day she had looked me in the eyes and said, "You've always been there for me, Dad. I don't know where I'd be without you." And now she couldn't even text me to say she was using my money? She couldn't send a single word to check if it was okay? The pieces came together too quickly. Brandon's smug confidence, his suggestion to exclude me, Erica's cold silence. Their decision to take the trip without me wasn't an oversight, it was calculated. And the fact that they left the card active meant they had assumed I wouldn't notice, or worse, that I wouldn't have the backbone to stop it. But they had miscalculated. I opened the banking app and tapped into the card management section. There it was, authorized users, Erica Hartman. I hovered my finger over the remove user option. My hand didn't shake. My heart didn't race. I wasn't acting out of rage. This wasn't a tantrum or a moment of impulse. This was years in the making. This was the result of watching someone you love turn your generosity into an unspoken contract of control. I tapped remove. The screen asked, "Are you sure? This action cannot be undone." I clicked yes. Just like that, the connection was cut. I placed the phone down and looked out the window. The sun was breaking through the clouds for the first time all day, and for a moment, I just stood there, taking in the silence. Not the kind of silence that comes from being excluded, but the kind that follows a decision you should have made a long time ago. For the first time in days, I felt something resembling clarity. Not peace, not yet, but a sense of grounding, of reclaiming something that had been slipping away from me piece by piece. They had taken the trip without me. They had used my plans, my resources, my love, and now they would do it without my permission. If Erica and Brandon wanted to live their lives without me in it, they were free to do so. But they would also have to do it without my money, my credit, or my silence. I turned back toward the office, grabbed a notebook, and began making a list, not of what they had taken, but of what I still had. My name was on the deed to their home. I still had the keys. I still had every receipt, every document, every decision I'd signed off on. They had treated me like a disposable bank account, but they had forgotten the most important detail. Banks keep records, and I was finally ready to use mine. The morning after I revoked Erica's access to my account, I stood at the window staring out at the street like I was waiting for something. But nothing moved. No cars, no footsteps, no phone calls. Just the stillness of a quiet neighborhood that had no idea what was about to happen. I had spent the night going over documents, pulling title deeds, insurance records, and emails from my real estate agent. Their house, the one on Alder Ridge, was still under my name. I had never transferred it because they never got around to the paperwork. Brandon had said it was temporary, that once they were more settled, they'd take care of it. But they never did. And now I realized that oversight was my leverage. I picked up the phone and called Caleb Monroe, my old real estate agent. The man had helped me buy my own home 20 years ago and had handled Erica and Brandon's purchase too. He was direct, discreet, and not the kind to ask unnecessary questions. "Caleb," I said, "I need to sell a property, fast." He didn't hesitate. "Address?" I gave it to him. "You still on the title?" he asked. "Sole owner," I replied. "Tenants?" "Out of town," I said. "They'll be back in 4 days." He was quiet for a moment. "Then, we can list today if you sign paperwork this morning." By noon, we had a listing agreement in place. By 1:30, he had a photographer scheduled. The house would be on the market by tomorrow morning. I hung up, then called Frank Delaney from Delaney's Movers. A man I'd worked with before. Big guy. Honest, no small talk. "Frank," I said, "I need everything inside a house packed up and moved to storage." He asked, "How long they've been gone?" 3 days. "You got keys?" "Front door and garage." There was a pause. "You the owner?" "Yes." Another pause. "Then, I've got a crew for you tomorrow at 8 a.m. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table, sipping a beer I hadn't touched in months, looking over a printed inventory checklist. It wasn't just furniture I was reclaiming. It was everything I had paid for. The leather couch from their anniversary. The dining set I bought when they moved in. Brandon's custom office chair. Erica's designer vanity. Even the 65-inch TV I gave them as a housewarming gift. It was all mine, and now it would all go. At exactly 7:50 a.m., I pulled into the driveway of the Alder Ridge property. It looked just like it had the last time I was here, pristine lawn, porch plants still alive, curtains pulled halfway. But it didn't feel like my daughter's house anymore. It felt like an asset, and I was here to liquidate. Frank's truck pulled up 2 minutes later. He stepped out, clipboard in hand, and 2 younger guys followed, already unloading boxes and dollies. "Mr. Hartman," he greeted with a firm nod. "Let's walk it." I unlocked the front door and we walked room to room, labeling everything that wasn't nailed down. "All of this going to storage?" he asked. "All of it," I said. "Nothing stays." They started with the bedrooms. I helped even though Frank told me not to. "Liability," he said. "I'm not that fragile," I replied. We packed Erica's wardrobe first. Designer dresses, handbags, shoes lined up like trophies. Then Brandon's gaming gear, dual monitors, and headset throne he spent hours in. The nursery came next. Unfinished, just boxes labeled, "Someday." I paused there. For a second, a thought came. Grandkids might have used this space. But then I remembered Paris, remembered how easily I was erased. And I packed the crib with steady hands. The movers worked fast, efficient. No commentary, just tape guns, box labels, and the dull sound of things being carefully wrapped and stacked. I caught a glimpse of their wedding photo on the wall. Erica in her dress, Brandon smiling like he'd won something. I lifted the frame off the hook and turned it face down on the table. By noon, the house was empty. Every room echoed. It felt like walking through a shell. I did one final check before locking up, then followed the truck to Brady Street Storage, where I'd already rented a 10 by 20 unit under my name. I watched as they moved everything in, row by row, box by box. I paid Frank in cash and gave the 2 workers a tip. "Hope everything works out," he said. "It already is," I replied. Back at home, I sat at my desk and wrote a simple note. Unit 14B, Brady Street Secure Storage. 1 month prepaid. I folded it neatly and placed it in an envelope. No drama. No revenge fantasy, just accountability. They had packed me out of their lives. Now I had returned the favor, neatly, efficiently, and on record. It was a quiet Saturday morning when I got the call from Caleb Monroe. "We've got an offer," he said. "Full price, all cash, young couple. They're relocating for work and love the house. They want to close immediately, move in this weekend if possible." I looked at the calendar. Erica and Brandon were flying back Sunday. "Let's do it," I said without hesitation. By that afternoon, I had signed the closing documents at the title company. Wire transfer pending. Deed transferred. Keys handed over. I didn't flinch once. No second thoughts. No hesitation. I had already said goodbye to the idea of being part of their future. Now I was simply signing the paperwork to prove it. The next day, I drove by the Alder Ridge house, slowly, unnoticed. A white U-Haul truck was backed into the driveway. The new owners, Michael and Renee, were were directing movers with boxes labeled nursery, books, and kitchen essentials. Renee was already planting flowers near the porch. Michael was assembling a grill out back. The house looked lighter somehow. New. Rewritten. I didn't stay long, just enough to see it had found people who actually wanted it. My phone rang around 3 p.m. I saw the international code on the screen, France. I let it ring. No need to answer. Not yet. An hour later, another call. I ignored that too. Then at 4:45 I received a string of frantic texts. Dad, we're home. Why are there strangers in our house? What is happening? Where are our things? I didn't reply. Some answers aren't meant to be typed out, but I drove by again. Just once more. Enough to witness what needed witnessing. Brandon was standing in the driveway, bags at his feet, arguing with Michael. This is our house, he barked. We live here. Michael, calm but firm, held out the deed. We closed 3 days ago. It's legally ours. Renee stood behind him, arms folded, watching carefully. Erica stood off to the side, stunned, her face bouncing between disbelief and fury. She saw me before Brandon did. Her mouth dropped open. Dad, she called. What's going on? I parked and stepped out, walking slowly, deliberately, envelope in hand. Michael and Renee looked uneasy now, unsure of the drama playing out in their driveway. Everything's fine, I said calmly. There's no mistake. I sold the house. Brandon's eyebrows pulled together like he couldn't understand English. You did what? I sold it, I repeated. Because I owned it. Your name was never on the deed. He opened his mouth and closed it again. His face turned red. Erica stepped toward me, disbelief melting into rage. Where's our stuff? I handed her the envelope. Unit 14B, Brady Street Storage. Everything is there, nothing damaged, 1 month prepaid. She snatched it from my hand like it might bite her. You had no right, Brandon shouted. You can't just do this. I can, I replied. And I did. This is theft, he barked. It's a legal transaction, I said. Ask your lawyer if you can afford one. Renee stepped forward nervously. Should we call someone? No, I said gently. You're fine. Enjoy your new home. Brandon was trembling now, trying to assert control through volume. We'll fight this. We'll sue. Good luck with that, I said, turning away. Erica's voice cracked behind me. Dad, please. This is our home. I paused and turned back one last time. Was it? You left me behind like I didn't exist. You used my money without asking. You erased me from your definition of family. I gave you everything. And in return, you gave me silence. Now you know what silence feels like. Michael stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on Renee's shoulder. We should go inside. They did. Closing the door behind them, the sound was quiet, final. Brandon stood there, stunned. Erica looked like she was about to cry, but didn't. Neither of them moved. I got back in my car, started the engine, and let the air conditioning hum into the silence. Through the window, I saw them standing beside their luggage, stranded in front of a house they no longer owned, with nowhere to go and no one to blame but themselves. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel used. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel like someone on the outside looking in. I felt free. 3 days passed before the knock came at my door. A uniformed process server stood on my front porch, holding an envelope. Samuel Hartman? He asked. I nodded. You've been served. He handed me the documents, turned, and walked away without another word. I stood there a moment, envelope in hand, feeling nothing. No panic, no surprise, just confirmation. I brought the papers inside and laid them flat on the kitchen table. It was a lawsuit, Erica and Brandon versus Samuel Hartman. The charges were dramatic. Unlawful eviction, conversion of property, emotional distress. It was written like a theatrical script, each paragraph more ridiculous than the last. But it didn't matter. The facts were solid. I owned the house, I had the deed, I had the payment records, the storage receipts, the signed closing documents. They had feelings. I had facts. I called my attorney, Richard Klein, a man I'd known since my contracting days. Thorough, sharp, not easily rattled. Send me everything, he said. I'll file the response tomorrow. By the end of the week, we were in front of a judge. Small courtroom. Quiet, almost clinical. Erica sat with Brandon to her left, dressed in what I assumed was their best attempt at looking sympathetic. Brandon wore a suit too large for his ego. Erica had pulled her hair back like she used to do in high school when she wanted to look mature. They didn't look angry. They looked stunned that I'd shown up calm. When the judge entered, the room straightened. She didn't waste time. Let's be clear, she said. This is not an emotional dispute. This is about ownership. Brandon's attorney started with a passionate argument, painting me as a manipulative father who had betrayed his own daughter for revenge. He said I had weaponized legality to punish them. He called my actions premeditated cruelty. Richard waited patiently, then stood, holding one document. Your Honor, here is the title deed with Mr. Hartman's name as sole owner. Here are the payment records. The property was listed, sold, and closed legally. The plaintiffs were never owners. They were never on the mortgage. They were not on the deed. They have no claim. The judge nodded, flipped through the file, then turned to Erica. You say he evicted you, but you were out of the country? Erica hesitated. Yes, we were in Paris. Who paid for the trip? The judge asked. Erica glanced at Brandon, then looked down. He did, she whispered. Your Honor, he left us with nothing. We came back and everything was gone. The judge turned to me. Where are their belongings now? Storage, I answered. Unit 14B, Brady Street Storage. 1 month prepaid. Nothing was damaged. Everything was cataloged. Do you have documentation? Yes. I passed it forward. She flipped through the papers, nodded, and looked back at Erica. It appears your father not only acted within his legal rights, but also ensured your property was preserved and accessible. I find no grounds for unlawful action. Brandon muttered something under his breath. The judge raised an eyebrow. Is there anything else? Their attorney tried to press the emotional angle again, citing familial betrayal and moral obligation, but the judge wasn't swayed. Morality is not enforceable in civil court, she said. This case is dismissed with prejudice. The gavel struck. Just like that, it was over. Outside the courtroom, I walked past them without slowing. Erica called after me, her voice unsteady. Dad, please. Can we talk? I stopped, turned, looked her in the eye. You used me, I said. Then you tried to punish me for stopping it. Now you're shocked that I defended myself. Brandon stepped forward, puffed up again. You think this makes you right? No, I said. It makes me free. I walked away without waiting for another word. Later that day, my lawyer called. Clean win, he said. They have no grounds to appeal. The deed, the records, all airtight. I thanked him and hung up, then opened my laptop. The bank transfer from the house sale had cleared. I moved the funds into a separate account labeled Future. Not revenge, not petty. Just closure. A few days later, the local paper ran a tiny blurb on the case. Family property dispute dismissed. It made no mention of the emotions involved, no record of what was really lost. But that was fine. This wasn't for the town. It was for me. At the grocery store, a woman from the church stopped me. I heard about the situation, she said. You okay? I nodded. Better than I've been in years. At the hardware store, I ran into Caleb Monroe. Never seen someone handle a storm with such precision, he said. I smiled. You ever see a man stop being a doormat in real time? He laughed and clapped me on the shoulder. To be honest, I think we all just did. I didn't need everyone's approval. I didn't care who gossiped. I wasn't interested in convincing the world that I had done the right thing. Because deep down, I knew, and that was enough. The house was quiet again, but this time, the silence didn't sting. It felt clean, earned, like the calm after a long, brutal storm. No more texts, no more calls, no more knocks at the door. Just the soft ticking of the kitchen clock and the distant hum of my neighbor mowing his lawn. The world had kept moving, and now, so had I. It was a Tuesday morning when I walked into the local pet shelter. I hadn't planned on it. I just woke up, made coffee, and realized I didn't want to drink it alone anymore. The woman behind the desk smiled when I asked about adoption. You looking for a puppy or something a bit more settled? She asked. I pointed to a photo on the wall. Who's that? That's Max, she said. Golden retriever. 3 years old. House-trained. His last family moved overseas. He's good with people. Bit shy at first, but loyal once he bonds. She took me to meet him, and when I knelt down, he walked over and sat beside me like he'd been waiting for me to show up all along. No barking, no jumping, just presence, quiet and grounded. I scratched behind his ears and felt something in my chest unclench. We drove home together 30 minutes later, Max in the passenger seat. Me with one hand on the wheel, the other occasionally resting on his head. That night, he curled up at the foot of my bed, and for the first time in months, I slept straight through till morning. Over the next few days, I found myself reorganizing things, not because I had to, but because I finally wanted to. I cleaned out the closet, donated what I didn't need, and boxed up what no longer held meaning. The old photos? I kept a few. Ones where the smiles still felt honest. The rest I stored away in a box labeled past. Not destroyed, not forgotten, just no longer on display. One evening, I found myself on a travel site, browsing RVs. Not for family trips, not for anyone's itinerary but mine. I'd always wanted to see the Grand Canyon, the Rockies, take the Pacific Coast Highway. I read reviews, watched videos, even drove out to a dealership just to walk through a few models. One in particular caught my attention. A 25-foot Airstream with just enough room for one man and a golden retriever. The sales guy tried to sell me on the extended warranty. I smiled, shook his hand, and paid cash. The next week was a blur of preparation. Max got his travel crate. I got the kitchen stocked, maps, first aid kits, new boots. I even bought a small camp chair, something sturdy I could unfold under the stars. I arranged mail holds, asked a neighbor to check in on the house, and made sure everything was secure. My home would still be here. But I wouldn't. The morning we left, I stood on the front steps for a long time. The dew was still clinging to the grass, the sun just starting to rise behind the rooflines of quiet houses. I looked at the name etched on my mailbox, Hartman, and felt a strange sense of ownership. Not over the property, over myself. We pulled out of the driveway at 7:43 a.m. I know because I checked the dashboard clock right as I turned the key. Max had his head out the window, ears catching the wind, his eyes full of something I recognized. Trust. As we drove through town, I passed familiar landmarks. The hardware store where I'd signed the listing papers. The coffee shop where the barista used to ask about my daughter. I nodded at them in passing, but didn't stop. There was no need to linger. This chapter had closed with a firm spine and a clean final page. When we reached the edge of town, I saw a new family in the front yard of the Alder Ridge house. Michael was adjusting a basketball hoop. Renee was planting something along the walkway. A small child laughed as a sprinkler caught him in the legs. I didn't slow down, but I smiled. That house had found what it deserved. 3 hours later, we stopped at a scenic overlook just past the state line. I unfolded the camp chair, cracked open a soda, and sat with Max beside me, watching the landscape stretch out in layers of blue and green. The wind was calm, the sky endless. For a moment, I thought of Erica. I hoped she was okay. I didn't wish her harm. I just no longer wished myself back into her life. Max shifted beside me and placed his head on my boot. I reached down, gave him a quiet pat, and whispered, "We're gonna be just fine." And for the first time in years, I believed it. Have you ever given everything to someone, only to realize you were only valued for what you provided? What would you have done if you were Samuel? Let us know in the comments. Your story might help someone else find their voice too. If this story hit home, please like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Revenge is Mine for more true-to-life stories where the forgotten finally get their moment. And don't forget to tap the notification bell so you're always here when justice is served. We'll see you in the next one.